Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to another tops and flops with a twist, sort of. If you follow my channel, you know that at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month, I look back at my reading and I choose the best and the worst of that month, the tops and flops. And mostly it's 3 tops and 2 flops, categories like the best nonfiction, the book that surprised me the most. You know the drill. But it's the beginning of October, which means we are 3/4 through the year, hence the thumbnail. There's only a quarter of the pie left, and I know, Kim, you hate fruit pies, so don't look at the thumbnail because it will make you sick. But anyway, I thought maybe for this tops and flops, I do it a little bit differently and I look at the whole 9 months and also expand the categories. And I didn't do this as a tag, but it could be weaponized as a tag. So if you are a content maker, a booktuber, one who films and uploads, then you might look at the 7 categories and make your own. I would love to see other people look back at the first 9 months of this year. End of public service announcement. So we go from the best to the worst, but we have subcategories. And the first category is the best novel that I've read in those 9 months. And I've read, again, it doesn't mean all the other books that I read were crap. I read a ton of good books, really, in these 9 months. But the one that I tried not to overthink it, and just, think which book stands out, which book do you sort of remember and think you will remember even a year or so from now. And that is, for me, Creatures of Passage by Black American author Morova Yejide. Was published in 2021 and I read it for the Booker longlist. No, the Women's Prize longlist. I'm sorry, the Women's Prize longlist, the beginning of the year, as ebook, as you can see. I will buy my own copy because I really love the book and then I want to have it on my bookshelf. But anyway, it is a very ghostly story because you have ghosts partly in trunks of cars, which is not something that appeals to me normally. But the whole atmosphere of the book was so wonderful and beautiful, even though the story is quite harrowing. We have abuse, we have sexual abuse, we have child abuse. So it's not a rosy story. And at the center of the story is Neftis, a taxi driver in the 1970s, the late 1970s, and she drives this old Plymouth, and she is a taxi driver of sorts, but not your regular taxi driver. She brings people to their destination, so to speak. And in her trunk, you have this dead woman ghost who doesn't play a major role in the plot. It's just something that is there. Then you have the nephew. The father of the nephew died, and the wife of the brother, because it's Nefti's brother, was killed under dubious circumstances. And then you have, as I said, the son who is also finding himself in weird circumstances with the water ghost. If you listen to this, it doesn't make sense. Just give it a try. But I love the atmosphere. I love the writing. I love the story and the way it was told. So for me, so far, this was the best novel that I read in the first 9 months. Number 2 is, I think, what did I write down? Yeah, my favorite character. And that was a bit of a difficult one because I tend not to identify with characters. They are always quite at a distance for me, but sometimes I have a character that I just find either charming or weird or in some way, special. And this one, I just have to check when the book was published, is from Becky Chambers' novella, A Psalm for the Wild-Billed, which was published last year. And it's the first in a series set on Panga. And in this world, you had robots doing all the menial, the labor. But at some point, the robots became self-aware and they wandered off and were never seen again. And we are now centuries later, and we have this monk, sibling Dex, who works as a tea monk. That means he travels around Panga with his wagon, and he offers tea and a listening ear to people who need it. And he's really good at it, but he is struggling with finding his place in the world. And at some point, he decides to go off on a quest. I'm not going to tell you more because it's a short book, so I don't want to give too much away. And then he encounters this robot, Moscap, and I just love this character. I think it's probably me because I also love the Murderbot, which is not a robot but an artificial intelligence, but still this type of character, innocent in a way, but also snarky. I just really enjoyed Moscap, and I will certainly read the next one, A Prayer for the Something, mainly because the interaction of these two characters I really like. Dex is also a good character, but Moscap, if I have to look, I looked at all the books that I read, and there were many in this 9 month, and Moscap, I thought, was just such a wonderful, such a wonderful character. So I chose him to be my favorite character. What is next? Best nonfiction book. That was really tough. And I don't know whether this pick will stay when I look back at the whole year, because I read some bloody good nonfiction this year. Rachel Carson, The Silent Spring was excellent. The last book that I read, Paola Ramos, Finding Latinx, was excellent. But again, I didn't want to overthink it. I thought, which book just jumps out and gives you also these, gives me, not you necessarily, but me, this type of kind of, fuzzy feeling that it's really, really nice and warm or something. And that was this book that I buddy read together with Heidi, Beloved Beasts by, Michelle Nijhuis. Rhymes with my house. So Michelle Nijhuis. I always struggle because this is a very Dutch name and the Dutch pronunciation would be Nijhuis. So she probably simplified it, or her ancestors simplified it. Anyway, this is science writing, nature writing. It's about how the conservation movement developed, conserving nature, conserving animals or plants or both, or nature more in general, like oceans or ocean life. And this is a history of how we came to think about conserving nature. So it spans 100, 150 years, and it's a combination of writing about our ideas of conservation, how they changed, but it's also focusing on various people who played an important role in bringing the conservation movement and the idea of conserving forward. So Rachel Carson, for instance, is mentioned, of course, in the book. For me, it just hit all the sweet spots. It's about nature, it's science, it's history, it has biography parts in it, people that I haven't heard about. It gave me a new insight into how we came to where we are now when we think of conserving nature. So I just really enjoyed this book. And of course, I also enjoyed the buddy read with Heidi. Next up is number 4. Yes, the weirdest book. And again, there were really a couple of weird books that I read, like Mrs. Caliban with this lizard creature, or what's it called, Berg, by Anne Quinn, where you have this dummy figure, puppet. There was no shortage of weird book, but the book that I also really struggled to understand, to make sense of, was translated fiction, Tentacle by Rita Indiana, translated from the Spanish by Archie Obeja. The book was published, again, let me check, in 2015 in Mexico, and in 2018 the English translation. And the premise of the book was really interesting. It is dystopian fiction, and it involves time traveling, but in a different way than you are used to in your regular science fiction. So, I mean, I mark this book as sci-fi, but it's not. It's a completely different sci-fi than, for instance, Becky Chamber that I just talked about. So you have this, and I don't even think I said Mexico, didn't I? No. Dominican Republic. I'm sorry, Dominican Republic. You probably already shouted at the screen for 2 minutes. So the author is from the Dominican Republic, and it's set in the Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo, and it's a post-apocalyptic world. Something happened with the oceans. We don't know what, and then you have this maid, Asild, a transgender man who plays an important role. We learn in she or he. It starts with a she, but then she identifies as transgender, and it's a he. So Asild becomes aware that he plays an important role in saving the world. So having this apocalyptic event erased from history, so to speak. And it's also very political, because you have this this dictator who also is engaged in he is asking advice from a spiritual advisor, and that spiritual advisor, kind of a witchy person, is also related to Asild. So it's a dense book, because it's also not very long. But the beginning, I thought, okay, we are in this post-apocalyptic world, and then the whole time traveling shit happened. And it just lost me. It was so weird for me so if you read this book, I'm really curious what you made of it. But I would say this is one of the weirdest books that I've read this year. So I chose this one. The next is, I think, the biggest surprise, if I see that correctly. Yes, biggest surprise, number 5. I can't even count. And I always have this category in my tops and flops, and like I told you many times before, I then choose a book that I had different expectations, or that for some reason I liked, even though if you read me the blurb, I would say this is not a book for me. And the last category is for this book, and it was also a buddy read with Courtney, Leslie Marmon Silko's Ceremony, published in 1977. Leslie Marmon Silko is an indigenous US-American writer, and this book is about Tayo, who comes back from World War II. We are now in the 50s. He was first a prisoner of war in Japan, and then he was in the hospital for quite a stretch of time. So it's now the beginning of the 50s when he finally comes home to his reservation. He suffers from severe post-traumatic stress disorder, even though it's not called that in the book because the book is from the 70s. But when we encounter Tayo, that's how we would label his sufferings. And the book is about how he tries to deal with that, and it involves a ceremony, so an indigenous ritual to, I was about to say cleanse him, but that's not the right word, but to rid him of his demons, so to speak. I am not into the whole dude bro theme of, guy returning from war, having a difficult time, drinking a lot, hitting his wife or his friends, or engaging in other type of violence in order to deal. And then it's just not my interest. And I know when Courtney and I talked about it, that Courtney felt the same way. But this was such a different way of tackling this topic that I really, really thought it was a good book. I didn't get everything, especially not the cultural references to indigenous cultures and rituals, but this main theme, which was, again, would have been something that I would say, nah, that's not for me. It really surprised me how much I liked the book and how much I was engaged with what happened to Tayo. Then to the flops. Number 6, The Biggest Disappointment. Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Also, as you can see from this non-removable sticker, Booker Prize finalist. It's historical fiction about female aviators, and partly set in the present in Los Angeles, in the movie world, with an actress who is supposed to play the aviator whose past we explore in the other timeline. I'm all in with the female aviator stuff. If you're not interested, you will find this boring anyway, but I'm interested. So it was not that. Not so interested in the whole movie stuff, but I thought, well, okay, it's still related to the aviator woman, and it just bored the bloody hell out of me. And not only the Hollywood part, but both parts. And it was so predictable and kind of cotton candy sweet in a way. And I saw it coming, the end, which was supposed to be a twist, but it's not. And it's one of those endings that you say, please, to the author, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't go there. And then she goes there, of course. So it was just, it sounded so great. And it was just absolutely not my cup of tea, even though a lot of people really, really enjoyed it. But unfortunately, I was not one of them. And then finally, the worst book I've read in those previous 9 months. So the worst book so far, without any doubt, another translated fiction, Natsuo Kirino, Out, and it's translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder, published in Japan in 1997, and the English translation in 2005. It's kind of crime. We have a group of Japanese female factory workers, and they all suffer from various men in their lives. And at one point, and that is not a spoiler because it happens very early on, one of them kills the husband and asks the other ones to help her in order to cover it up. Love that premise. Good crime fiction. But the misogyny in this book, the internalized misogyny of all female characters, thus the author, I think, has a message here that I find, I don't want to read a book where a rape victim falls in love with her rapist halfway through the rape. That's just not good. And it goes on and on and on in this vein. So no, this was, I had high hopes for it, but this was just horrible for me. Anyway, 20 minutes. Oh dear. But I wanted to do this tops and flops differently for the first 9 months. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And again, if you make videos and you find the idea appealing, make a video of your best and worst of the first 9 months. You don't have to follow my categories, but if you want to, I would love to hear it. Looking forward to your comments as always, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.